Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to our /EntitledPeople, where people truly believe that they're the center of the universe and who cares about others. And in today's episode, we're dealing with super entitled restaurant Karens. They're spitting on servers, slapping servers, making waitstaff cry. It's a wild one today, guys, so sit back, relax, and seriously try not to shake your heads too hard at the entitlement. Let's dive in. So I had been working at this fine dining gig for about a year or so in a new city, and it was a mixed bag. This was a classic restaurant situation. The staff was coked out together on the regular, and drinking a box of wine over 2 shifts was totally normal. The owner was also a character. Conversely, you could make a cool $1,000 on a weekend, $1,400 if it was New Year's Eve, so, you know, the usual for fine dining. This is the story of hosting a private supper club for something like $300 a head. They had brought in almost $20,000 in wine. We got about a quarter of that at the end. And here's a fun fact. A $600 bottle of wine isn't that much better than a $20 bottle of wine. Live and learn. That said, everyone seemed normal and polite and also ludicrously rich. The setup they decided on was past apps, then 5 courses, culminating in a phenomenal foie gras dessert. So the actual party begins. I'm casually passing appetizers during the champagne bit, mostly wondering when I can justify a smoke break, when there was a bit of a ruckus. Someone dropped a champagne flute, and I thought, great. I drop my empty board in the kitchen, and I run to grab a dustpan. I arrive with my dustpan, and I go to clean up the glass like a normal person. And this is when one of the men begins fussing, immediately saying, "There's glass in my shoes. I can't believe this." His wife responds, "Let the staff do their effing job, Tim. Your shoes are fine." I clean up the glass, and I thought, okay, time for a cigarette. As I'm heading into the kitchen and passing my coworkers, I hear a further commotion. And I'm thinking, great, Tim has glass in his shoes again, and it'll surely cause his death. But no, one of these incredibly elderly men had dropped the glass because he was having a heart attack. Roughly 10 people began caring for him. They asked for a box of seltzer to put his feet up, and his wife just says to me, "Oh, this just happens sometimes. Don't you worry about him." And I'm thinking, no crap, Susan, he's effing 85 years old. Chef ends up calling 911, despite hearing a few people saying that this will ruin the vibe of the party. The old man's chilling on a banquet with his feet up, you know, in a state of cardiomyopathy. Meanwhile, everyone else has returned to drinking champagne and asking if there's any more of those adorable little Wagyu beef apps coming soon. A little while later, the ambulance arrives, the paramedics show up, and again, everyone in the party's just chilling with their champagne, laughing, and we're all still opening bottles and dropping appetizers. The old man's insisting that he's fine and can stay. The paramedics check him out, and they're like, no sir, you're dying. So they bundle him into an ambulance, and we think, okay, fine. We can get the rest of this party over with. And this is when his wife comes back and says, no, you can't take him. Harold didn't get to try the first oyster course, and he was really excited for it. So she makes the ambulance wait while the chef packs an oyster course into a takeaway box. And his wife ferries it dutifully back to him, and then they leave. So the rest of the party goes on, and all's reasonably well. At the end, they toast to Harold, who may or may not be dead, and they leave us a ton of wine and tip 15%. Seriously, rich people are definitely something else, aren't they? And hey, at least Harold's wife had his best interest at heart, right? Like, I just found it so funny how she stopped the ambulance and she was like, if my husband is dying, his last meal has gotta be the oysters that he wanted to try so badly. This next post, a Karen and her grandson steal a reserved table. So let me tell you what recently happened, and I'm pissed. I work at a restaurant, one of those cute little bistros that's not super upscale, but usually it's fully booked because we're in an awesome location and don't have many tables. We recently had a woman emailing us saying that she wants to bring her boyfriend here to celebrate a very special event. This lady didn't really ask for much. She just asked if she could pay up front to have a more secluded, decorated table. Now, we love these kinds of reservations when people ask nicely and are realistic about it. So we close off a little corner of the restaurant, nothing crazy. It's still open to the rest, but it's in a little nook that you can't see into. We put up some string lights, candles, and flowers. She also came in earlier that night to put up something of her own. I don't want to say what it was, but it was clearly a personal item. Well, the night of, the couple arrives. They give me their last name, and I of course know immediately who they are, and I happily lead them to their very special table, only to find an old lady and a kid sitting there with their belongings all over the place. Turns out, they thought the "Please wait to be seated" sign, the "Closed for a private event" sign, and the "Reserved" sign somehow did not apply to them. They barged right past everything when nobody was looking, and sure enough, they simply claimed the only free table. Now, some people just have zero awareness, so part of me had to assume that maybe they were a bit slow. I tried to confront them very nicely, even though I was panicking with the couple right behind me. But oh boy, did that older lady know exactly what she was doing. She immediately blows up about no one tending to their table, and how dare we make them wait. So I explain that this table was reserved and they need to leave, and that the whole place was fully booked. She then explains to me very loudly that she doesn't care, that all the other restaurants on the block were full, and that her and her grandson have every right to be here. It took a lot of arguing between them, me, and my coworkers, but when we threatened to call the police to have them removed, she finally gave up. But unfortunately, most of the damage was already done. It left everyone in a sour mood, and to make matters even worse, the kid had tampered with and practically destroyed the sweet woman's personal item that she had put up there right before. It wasn't a valuable item, just a cute little surprise. The couple looked pretty upset, and while they didn't blame us for anything, I could tell how close to tears the woman was. The surprise she had planned was a pretty big deal, and I simply felt awful for her. I've always heard these stories about having to deal with crazy people in the service industry, but this was a first for me. My absolute deepest condolences to anyone dealing with this crap for a living. Yeah, some people's sense of entitlement is off the charts, isn't it? Like, she knew that table wasn't a normal setup, but she didn't care. And on top of it, not only did she take something that didn't belong to her, but she let her grandkid destroy someone else's property. Mind-boggling, right? But Opie does come to the comments to say that although the night started off rough, the couple did end up having a great time, and they dined for free that night. This happened a few months ago in my hometown, a little city in central Mexico. First of all, 2 nights before this happening, my city got hit by really strong winds. We hadn't seen anything like it before. The wind tore up some trees, billboards, fences, and in my house, it tore up a plastic dome we had in the middle of our roof. After spending the next day repairing and cleaning everything, my parents decide to relax for the weekend by going to eat at one of our favorite places. So we were in this restaurant, and it was clear that it also got hit hard by the winds. The restaurant's basically a giant terrace, so it's pretty much outdoors inside the city. Upon entering, I noticed the owner on the floor next to the bar fixing some stuff. He was wearing some working clothes, and he was full of grease and stuff. So if you didn't know him already, you would think he's a worker in the restaurant. He's also pretty chill and kind, always greets regulars, and goes from table to table asking if everything's okay. The place is also casual fancy and one of the best in the city. This is when the entitled man shows up. While we're eating, there's a blackout because workers of the electrical company were fixing a damaged power line nearby, so the TVs and the music went off. The guy just starts whistling and screaming for the restaurant staff to do something. And this is when the owner approaches him and he said they would fire up their backup generator and please be quiet in the meantime, because it's no place to be causing a scene. Well, hearing that, the man goes ballistic because he thought a worker was shushing him. So the usual. He hits the owner with the classic, "Do you even know who I am?" The guy just starts yelling and telling him that he knows the owner, that he was gonna get him fired and the like, and that he wanted to speak to the manager because he's paying a lot of money for this service being so crappy. Now, obviously, knowing the owner was a lie because the owner was right in front of him, just in working clothes, and the man was probably trying to show off because at his table was another man and two visibly embarrassed women. The whole restaurant goes quiet at this point. Now, I always saw the owner as a gentle giant because he's huge and pretty cool. But he got as red as a tomato and he starts yelling at the guy. I've never seen him like that. I'm roughly translating what the owner said, and his choice of words were interesting. Spanish is such a beautiful language to tell somebody to go F themselves in. So the owner just screams at the guy that this place was his effing restaurant, and that the guy wasn't welcome anymore, that he needs to get his companions and get the F out of there. The owner told him he didn't care who he was, that he doesn't want his money, he just wanted him gone. And the funny thing is, the guy was curled up in his seat from being yelled at by this huge man. And once the owner was done, he stands up and quickly went to the exit, while yelling cuss words at him when he was at a safe distance. When all was over, the owner apologizes to everyone in the restaurant, and he offered some free drinks and snacks. Like I said, he's a pretty cool guy. And by the way, we were without electricity for 5 whole minutes. So if the guy waited, it all would have been fine. When I was in my early 20s, I worked at a breakfast joint across the street from a university that was having a stellar football season. Before the games, we would get slammed so hard that the wait would be 2+ hours. There were 40 tables, 2 servers, 1 host, and 1 chef. One family, a man and woman with a college-age boy and girl, was being really disruptive and rude to the hostess. The husband tried to sit at a dirty table, and I told him that he could either wait for the hostess or leave. They finally get a table in my section, which I thought, yay. The obviously controlling father/husband orders for everyone. He also slams a cup of hot coffee while giving me a finger to the face so I can immediately have the honor of refilling it. The whole time, the family looks mortified. I put in their food order and unsuccessfully tried to forget about them. The guy yells at me every 5 minutes about his food while I'm flying around trying to get the other 20 tables done. I finally yell at him and I ask how fast he thinks the kitchen can possibly get the food out if he had to wait 2 hours just to sit down. I was done with him, and even my other tables were lamenting his behavior with me. His family just stared at the table. When the guy's food comes out and his 6th coffee was refilled, I was beyond elated. I was in the middle of a coffee run 2 minutes later when this man yells at me saying, "Are my eggs supposed to be this cold?" I walked past him, pretending not to hear him, when this guy has the audacity to grab my arm and pulls me so hard I actually fell backwards. I then scream, "What the F?" Of course, with me falling backwards, the burning hot coffee pot I was holding sloshes all over him. The guy throws his arms up as the hot coffee hits his chest. He leaps out of his chair and he starts to motion like he was going to attack me, when just about every guy jumps out of their chair. I just ran to the back. Through my anxiety attack, I huffed enough air to share what happened with the owner. He forces the man out and the wife to pay. The kids ran out with their father while he yelled, "Don't you effing dare tip that bitch." The wife didn't make eye contact. She paid with a credit card and then slipped me a 20 and whispered, "I'm sorry." They then went out, never to be seen again. My other tables literally applauded me when I went back into the dining room, and everyone tipped me a hearty amount. Seriously, I hope his wife divorced him. Yeah, I hope the wife realized right then and there what a winner she has. Like, I just don't get how some people feel the need to attack waitstaff. And honestly, if the guy can literally attack a stranger over eggs, like what the heck is going on at home, right? And this person shares a similar story where a nasty Karen gets in their face. They say, "This was around 10 years ago, and one of many of my worst server experiences. I was a young whippersnapper of around 20 years old. I was working at a restaurant that could be defined as a French-inspired bistro. The day this happened, we had a table of 8 women come in. They were on the older side of middle-aged, and they were all in a very similar knitted sweater, and it was clear from the get-go that there was a leader. From the very beginning, I felt the leader wanted a fight, and her friends were her sheep/disciples. The ordering process was the leader bossing around her friends on their choice of orders, and then shaming all of them for eating butter with the complimentary bread. I found it odd that they were just strangely agreeing with her while just dipping into the ramekins of butter. The leader then orders the New Zealand salmon fillet, which I thought, great, that wasn't too bad. Well, how wrong I was. I deliver the leader's salmon fillet. It's a deliciously crispy skin-on fillet that's perfectly cooked with a lovely array of sides. As soon as I put the dish down in front of her, all hell breaks loose. She says to me, "What's this?" I reply, "This is the salmon fillet you ordered." She then says, "But this is a fish." I, of course, was questioning all of my life choices at this point, and I say, "Yes, it's the salmon you ordered." And this is when she says, "I ordered salmon, not fish." And I was honestly gobsmacked at this point, and my little 20-year-old brain couldn't compute that this grown lady in her white pearled sweater was unaware that salmon was a fish. To my utter dismay, shock, and disappointment, all of her disciples start aiding their mighty gray-haired leader saying, yeah, just agreeing with her. I end up saying, "But salmon is a fish," and that was the wrong thing to say. This woman gets up from her chair right up into my face, and she starts screaming at me that how dare I be so insolent, and that I was trying to embarrass her in front of her friends. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, she then proceeded to spit on me right on my face. I just went into shock, really. Thankfully, the chef had seen this lady spit on me through the window, and he got my manager, who then kicked them out. Thank goodness for supportive managers. So in the end, the customer is not always right. And in case you're also in the dark about this, salmon is indeed a fish. So this one just makes me effing furious. Furious enough to make me, a bartender, walk out of a shift on Saturday night. Last week, while my manager was out sick and I was the acting manager, we had an incident where a couple of 60-somethings came in, ordered one beer, and complained the beer was flat. Of course, it wasn't flat. They repeatedly insult the young woman who brought it to them, and after I was involved, the old woman slaps her hand when she tried to take it back. I kicked them both out. Well, last night, they came back. They immediately threw a tantrum and they asked to see my manager to complain about last week. They told her the waitress was stupid, rude, and incompetent, and she tried to take something back that they'd ordered without permission, and she kicked them out. My manager calls over the waitress and made her apologize to them without even asking her side of the story, and then pulled her into the office. She finally asked to hear her side of the story, and then called her a liar repeatedly and fired her. And let me repeat that. This 19-year-old girl was forced to apologize to an old woman that struck her and then was fired for it. I didn't know exactly what was going on until I heard all the shouting and I saw her leaving the office crying. When I went to follow her, I saw the old couple and I already knew what happened. I went to my manager's office and I let her have it. I walked into her office and I slammed the door. I had her attention and I said, "Did you just fire Jessica?" She said, "Yes. Why?" And I said, "Why the F would you fire her? What did those two just tell you?" She stammers a bit and then answered, "Well, that one lady told me she brought them a flat beer and was rude to them, and then tried to take it back without asking and then kicked them out. She then told me this ridiculous story about them insulting and hitting her." She then turns back to her computer, and I just about at the top of my lungs informed her that that story was true. I was there. I was at the table when it happened. She then flinches, and she looks over to me and says, "You don't have to shout at me, you know." I just move forward with, "Why didn't you talk to me first?" And she responds, "Well, nobody mentioned you. Like, why? What'd you do?" She then looks at me with disgust and she says, "Excuse me, but I know this couple from church. They're a nice couple. They wouldn't do something like that, especially not Karen hitting a server." Now's a good time to probably mention that this little place doesn't have a camera, so it's really my word and this fired young lady's against two senior citizens that my manager knows from church. Suffice to say, we're effed as far as her believing us goes. But I was too pissed off to care about that. I just say to her, "Well, clearly you don't know them that well because she did. I was right there at the table when it happened, and I won't be in the same building as them, so either they're leaving or I'm leaving." Now, this may seem like a risky move on my part, and it is. But keep in mind, I'm the only bartender, and this was around 10 p.m. on a Saturday. Plus, I'm the only supervisor outside the kitchen and one who does most of her job as a manager. She can't replace me and she'll be losing revenue and she'll have to work a lot harder than she's used to. And what does she do? She tells me to get out of her office because she's siding with the Karens. To which I thought, fine, I can do that. I get out of her office and out of the restaurant. On my way out, I find a waiter who's taking their order. I pull him aside and I let him know what's going on. He tells me that he'll spread the word to the other servers and the kitchen staff about what this old couple did and to not serve them. I don't know how well that did or didn't work. I find the young girl still sitting outside crying. She doesn't have a car, so she had to call her dad and he's not there yet. I sit down next to her and I let her know that I just walked out over this, and I asked to hear her side of what just happened. I decide to wait to talk to her father because I figure that her supervisor backing her up should help her case, and I hope it did, but I'm not sure. The guy didn't stick around long. I then leave, and I get an angry phone call from my manager on my way home about walking out. I remind her it's exactly what I told her I was going to do, and then hang up the phone. About half an hour later, she calls me back, and she says she'll rehire the server if I come back. I agree, and I go right back at my own expense. My manager insisted, when it was brought up, that the young lady already agreed to come back and then thanked her for it, and she is back and working again. As far as I can tell, there's not going to be any serious consequences for anybody. Thankfully, the owner believed us. He believes the old woman did strike her on the hand, and while they're not banned, he does agree with me kicking them out for that. This wasn't the ideal way for this to go. The old couple can still come back, and our young server has reason to be worried. And the owner, well, he's actually not gonna do anything about anything that happened at all. I think we can all agree mega props to OP for having the integrity to stand up for their coworker, because not everyone will risk their job like that. I'm glad it ended kind of okay and they both kept their jobs. But honestly, with a manager like that, I think the employees all deserve and can do much better, especially when you see the manager siding with friends and acquaintances. And guys, this last OP deals with a nasty Karen letting her son steal from them. Listen to this. So strap in because this is a long one. And just for backstory, I'm an avid pin collector, and I have at least 100+ pins at my house. I've been collecting for about a year now, and I'm very proud of all of my different pins, especially considering that any given pin could have cost between $1 to $15. The most I've ever paid for one pin was $25, and the most expensive pin in my collection is about $60 that I found at a pin swap. So I've sunk quite a bit of money and time into this hobby, but I genuinely love it, and I don't mind spending the spare money when I have it. That said, the whole left pocket of my server apron is covered with about 20 of some of the favorites that I own. I'm the only server at my work with anything on my apron, so it's a good way to set myself apart. The kids also love them, and the conversations with them typically end with me showing them pictures of my whole collection. We all leave with a pleasant experience, right? Wrong. So I was working the morning shift at a little German restaurant I work at. We were completely dead like always when this family of 3 comes in. A mom, a dad, and their small 3 or 4-year-old son. I go up to greet them and I'm in the middle of my introduction when I hear the son screaming, "Mommy, Mario," referring to my pair of Mario and Luigi pins. Immediately, I see an opportunity to start being friendly with these folks, so I start asking him about his favorite games. I finish up their drink order, and as I'm walking away, I can hear the boy go, "Mama, I want that Mario and Luigi." And her response was, "Okay, let's see if we can get it for you." To which I thought, that's weird wording, but I figured she just meant she'd buy him a set when they got home. I come back with their drinks, and when I set them down, the mother says to me, "Excuse me, but my son wants some of your pins." Thinking she was asking where I got them from, I chuckle and I tell her it's a part of a 4-piece set that you could find on this specific website. And this is when she says, "No, he wants yours right now." She then puts her hand out like I was supposed to drop them in there. I really did try to be as polite as I could, so I replied, "I'm sorry, miss, but these are my own pins. I hope you understand. Are y'all ready to order?" And she's furious at this point, and she says, "Are you serious?" I respond, "Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry. It's really nothing personal." She then says to me, "Well, my son wants it. Let me buy it off you." I just tell her, "I'm sorry, they're not up for sale right now, so are y'all ready to order?" They begrudgingly order, and I go back to the server station to input the order when suddenly I feel hands around my waist. I obviously freak out because who the heck's grabbing me from behind? So I spin around and I yell, "What the heck?" Only to be greeted by the little boy looking mortified that he'd been caught trying to pull the pins right off my apron. I didn't yell exactly, but I was incredibly loud when I said, "Are you for real? Get back to your table, kid." The kid starts crying and he ran back to his parents. Well, I went to my manager and I told him the whole truth, including me snapping at this kid. I told him that I was about to go confront them and if he would accompany me. So I go back out and oh man, hell breaks loose. Kids scream crying, the mom's infuriating, and as soon as I show my face, the mom goes off. She says to me, "Who do you think you are screaming at my son? He's a kid. You're a grown-ass woman." I let her know, "Ma'am, your son was told he could not have someone else's property, and you threw a fit over that. And then, your son was caught in the employees only area trying to pull the pin right off my body, and he scared me to death while doing it. I'm sorry I raised my voice, but you've gotta understand he cannot do that." The mom then says to me, "Are you dumb? He's just a kid, so give him that pin. Let me pay you." I respond, "No, I take pride in my collection and I'm not just gonna give it away to whoever likes them." My manager of course intervenes at this point and he tells her the exact same thing I did, how her son overstepped boundaries and I don't owe her anything except friendly service which he believed I gave her. He then adds, "You're lucky she doesn't want to press charges for attempted theft." The mom's still livid, but her whole demeanor changes to fear. She then says, "You know what? We don't need this crap. We're leaving and never coming back to this dump. We will ruin you." And with that, she storms out. With all the excitement, my manager and I completely forgot about their food and payment until it was too late. I offered to pay for all of it because I did feel it was my fault, but my manager insisted it wasn't and he would just comp the food entirely. So the moral of the story is to teach your kids that stealing is wrong and to respect other people's property. Also, to keep their hand away from people they don't know. Thank goodness it ended there because we all know it could have easily escalated, right? At least the mom had some common sense to not double down. And Opie does share a picture of their apron, guys, and what pins were on it that day. That Mario and Luigi is pretty cool, but as a parent, maybe don't tell your kid to just go for it and steal it off of somebody. But yeah, that's entitled people for you guys. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/pro revenge episode where psycho bosses are getting taught lessons they won't forget. And Opie goes out of his way to bankrupt a nasty boss. So go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.